The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
A pair of gloves, blood, and DNA all linked O.J. Simpson to the murders of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. But in the end, it wasn't enough. I'm Michael Ayala. This is Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win?
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
None of us knew how big this would be.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
I decided to set Mr. Darden up. I said, that glove won't fit O.J., and if you don't ask him to try it on, I will. He took the bait.
I remember the killer kind of not straightening out his hands. He wasn't really tugging on it. It was sort of like an actor's portrayal of how you put on a glove.
Marcia Clark and the rest of the prosecutors were stunned because this was not what they were expecting, and this was not what was planned.
You've got a glove that was soaked in blood, that was brittle. All the evidence still pointed to one person and one person only.
There. How about that, Mr. Fung?
My name is Dennis Fung.
He certainly didn't think that he'd have to undergo what he went through, the beating that he took from the defense. He never expected any of that.
I'd like to show you a video, Mr. Fung.
They were able to poke so many great holes into the blood evidence.
We didn't win the O.J. Simpson case. The prosecution lost it.
The last thing anybody thought about was two young people getting slaughtered in West LA in the middle of the night. That just seemed to be forgotten entirely.
A police forensics team began a search of the crime scene and O.J. Simpson's home. Investigators removed several pieces of evidence from both properties.
The story was everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. This crime was so brutal. Ron Goldman was stabbed multiple times, and Nicole's throat was cut so deeply, she was almost decapitated.
Simpson, are you a suspect? Anything you can say? O.J., are you a suspect?
It looked like a made-for-TV crime, but this was a real crime. And I think people got caught up in the story of it and the allure of it. This was a horrific crime. There was a massive amount of blood at the crime scene. It was basically soaked with blood.
There was so much blood. There was his blood, their blood. There was his blood drops next to the bloody shoe prints.
After detectives find Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman's bodies, one of the things that sticks out are bloody shoe prints. And alongside those shoe prints are drops of blood.
Now, the shoe prints that you saw were determined to have been made by a size 12 shoe. The defendant wears the size 12. There were blood drops just to the left of those bloody shoe prints.
It was evident at the time that the blood tailed in the same direction as the person who was walking, indicating that there would probably be an injury on the left side of whoever was bleeding at the scene. We felt whoever that was probably the suspect.
The blood droplets on the left-hand side of the shoe prints were tested. And when those test results came back, it showed that that blood belonged to O.J. Simpson. At the time of his arrest, O.J. had a cut on his left hand.
I realized Simpson was the primary suspect when we received the results that Simpson's blood had been found.
Besides finding Simpson's blood next to the shoe prints, which was confirmed to be a match through DNA testing, investigators also found his DNA on the back gate leading out of Nicole's condo.
I think that the DNA was a clincher. We had had conversation as a family all along but you think it's him. The DNA evidence proved it beyond any doubt in my mind.
At the center of the state's case is O.J.'s blood. They have it everywhere. But what can the defense do? Well, they have two ringers. They have Barry Scheck and they have Peter Neufeld. And between them, they come at this central piece of evidence. They don't shy away. They don't lean away. They lean directly into it.
Barry Scheck was the main attorney for the defense who was charged with basically dismantling all of the DNA evidence. Barry Scheck was the only person on that defense team, I believe, that wasn't concerned about whether O.J. Simpson was guilty or innocent. All he cared about was the science of the DNA. How was the evidence handled?
Scheck and Neufeld, they looked at the blood evidence, and they said, this evidence is very bad. They're bright, they're very able lawyers. We call them the gangsters from New York.
There was a mountain of evidence against O.J. Simpson. His blood was at that crime scene, and there was unexplained blood at his house, on his property. But yet, Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld did such a masterful job of making the jury start questioning it all. What they did was they used hours and hours of the video footage that the media had captured of the LAPD processing the crime scene. And Scheck and Neufeld zeroed in on every little thing, every little mistake they made a big deal out of.
I remember, Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld being camped out in the conference room of our office all the time. And they had all of this footage from the criminalists picking up the evidence at the crime scene. And they would pore over it for hours and hours and hours and days and days.
Those two guys, to me, made the difference in the whole outcome of that case because they were able to poke so many great holes into the blood evidence.
The defense not only attacked the way the Los Angeles police collected evidence, but also who was doing it. The lead criminalist, Dennis Fung, and criminalist Andrea Mazzola would be major targets at trial.
When you met with Dennis Fung, didn't he review with you his recollection as to who collected which items at Bundy and Rockingham?
Yes.
And would you agree, ma'am, that his recollection of who collected which items were different?
We were discussing the scene in general.
Ma'am, during that discussion, did Dennis Fung tell you what his recollection was as to which blood drops he collected at Rockingham?
I don't believe he said recall his recollection.
My name is Dennis Fung, D-E-N-N-I-S-F-U-N-G.
Dennis Fung, poor Dennis Fung. He was on the stand for 8 days of cross-examination by Barry Scheck, and it was pretty brutal. And a lot of mistakes came out that he made, and he was really kind of seen as this sort of hapless.
Would you agree that it is the role of the criminalist to preserve the integrity of evidence?
That is one of the roles, yes.
And that would mean that it's your job to make sure that evidence is not contaminated?
Yes.
The one witness in the whole trial who stayed on the witness stand the longest was Dennis Fung. That was sort of exhibit number one, focused on evidence collection and failure to adhere to their own protocol and policies at the time.
Wouldn't you have greater confidence in your recollection of who collected which item if the form had been filled out at the time of collection?
Yes.
He certainly didn't think that he'd have to undergo what he went through, the beating that he took from the defense. He never expected any of that. I would call him a competent criminalist, not an overly experienced one, especially in testifying. And that's magnified 100 times over when you testify in a high-profile case, and times that by 100 when you do it in front of 50, 60 million people.
Still ahead on Trial and Error.
Was any of this evidence moved while you were there?
No.
Below for any of these items?
No.
Officer Van Adder had taken the test tubes with the blood of the victim home with him and poured it on the sock.
Plus, the defense completely destroys LAPD criminalist Dennis Fung.
There. How about that, Mr. Fung?
The Court TV podcast will return. The following program contains graphic images. Viewer discretion is advised.
All of this evidence collected, whether at Bundy or Rockingham or wherever, went through the LAPD lab. That laboratory is a cesspool of contamination.
O.J. Simpson's defense team went to great lengths to attack the physical evidence pointing to Simpson's guilt, calling into question the way the crime scene and O.J.'s home on Rockingham were processed, leaving the jury to question the validity of DNA and any forensic evidence that links Simpson to the murders.
Nowhere, I think, will you find in this case is the problem of the evidence being contaminated, compromised, and corrupted more important than the area of DNA testing.
One of the things that the defense team did was they looked for the state's mistakes, and they made mistakes. In fact, one of the things that they looked at was a blanket. Detectives actually covered Nicole Brown's body with a blanket that was from inside her house. Here's the problem. O.J. was inside that house, too, previously. And so his DNA could have been on that blanket. It's called cross-contamination.
Who took this blanket out and put it over the body? Who did that? I did. And where'd you find this blanket, sir? Inside the house.
Miss Nicole Brown Simpson's body was in the area of that blanket.
Yes.
And Mr. Goldman's body was eventually placed in the area of that blanket.
Yes.
That would be what is known as contamination of the crime scene.
Yes.
That's a terrible mistake from the point of view of a criminalist, isn't it?
Yes.
There were a couple things that the defense keyed in on at the Bundy crime scene. For instance, the leather glove that was found next to Ron Goldman's body that appeared to have been moved. Also, remember, Ron Goldman was bringing to Nicole the glasses that her mother left at the restaurant, and he put them in a white envelope. That white envelope also appeared to have been moved.
Mr. Fung, isn't it your responsibility to investigate whether evidence at the crime scene has been moved or altered from its original position?
In some respects, it is my responsibility. Yes.
Was any of this evidence moved while you were there? This envelope or any of these items?
No.
I want you to take a look, if you will, at the envelope in these two different photographs. See the envelope here?
Yes, sir.
You see where the grouting on the envelope is across the grouting?
Yes, sir.
Big 104. You see that?
Yes, sir, I did.
See the grouting here?
Yes, sir.
The envelope's on the other side of the grouting?
Yes.
Can you explain how that envelope got moved?
No.
Yeah? No.
You photograph scenes as soon as you can so that nothing is disturbed. You want everything in the pristine locations that they were initially. And that's what happened. Coroner comes along, and they had to remove the bodies. She inadvertently touched the envelope. It moved a little bit, but sometimes things happen. We don't have robots yet. RoboCop out there investigating murder scenes. Nothing is planted. Nothing was done on purpose. It's as simple as that. Cochran knows that, but he's not stupid. We're going to get the cops every way we can because there's just too damn much evidence.
And I want to show you two photographs side by side. If you'll notice, the fingers of the glove are pointed toward a tennis shoe. You see that?
Yes, sir.
And do you notice that the V part of the glove is almost up against the walkway there? Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
Can you see where the V part of the glove is now pointing in another direction?
Yes, sir.
Been moved? You see that?
Yes, sir.
One of the benefits the defense had was the processing of the crime scene being documented by the media. Cameras converged on the crime scene and recorded everything the LAPD was doing there. So as those detectives and the criminalists were processing the crime scene, every move was caught on camera. The defense team had hours of that video footage, and they poured through all of it.
You ever saw that glove on or near the blanket?
I don't recall, no.
I'd like to show you a video, Mr. Fung. Now, this appears to be you putting down evidence tags, correct?
Yes.
You know it's the glove, don't you?
I don't know that.
You know it's a glove and you just got caught by this videotape, isn't that right?
Sustained. I thought the defense very adroitly went after the collection of evidence, and there were mistakes that were made. There were better processes that should have been employed. Dennis Fung failed to follow some of even his own agency's protocols, ungloved hands or uncovered shoes. So there were certainly things that could have been done better.
When you are collecting an item, you would not touch that item with your bare hand, would you? When collecting it?
I would try not to.
Did you touch that envelope with your bare hands while collecting it, Mr. Fong?
No.
Sure of that?
Yes.
No question about it in your mind?
Yes.
Mr. Fong, I'd like you to watch this tape very, very carefully with the jury. There. How about that, Mr. Fung?
What about that, Mr. Fung? I mean, it was really, really powerful. Barry Scheck was amazing. He is a pistol. I think Barry Scheck is a brilliant lawyer.
This is a very, very big trial. And in your investigation, you have to make sure that you have all I's dotted, all T's crossed. You can't have something that someone can say, oh, I don't think you were doing this procedurally correct.
Then there's the blood on the back gate. It was tested. It was found to be O.J.'s blood. And there's a photo of it. There's a documented photo showing the blood is there. But that photo, there's a problem with it. It was taken 3 weeks after the murders. So what did the defense do? They went back and they found a photo taken the day after the murders. And guess what? The blood isn't there.
Look at that photograph. That photograph doesn't show any blood. It shows some little tiny spot. It was totally inconsistent. Picked up and collected 3 weeks afterwards when people have been all over the place.
You see what is marked as 116?
Yes.
As a blood drop in the rear gate.
Yes.
That's what you saw on July 3rd.
Yes.
Let's look back at the picture of the gate on June 13th. Where is it, Mr. Fung?
I can't see it in the photograph.
The way that the evidence was collected was a major, major point in the trial and a major part of the defense case. The defense alleged that the collection of the evidence led to corrupted evidence, contaminated evidence. The LAPD made mistakes. They admitted to making mistakes.
Fung was on the stand for over a week, and the damage was irreparable. For the jury, the mistakes made by the LAPD criminalist whittled away at the credibility of any evidence that seemed to connect O.J. to the crime.
All right, you're free to go. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Weirdly, at the end of this brutal, almost torturous cross-examination, he got up off the stand and shook Barry Scheck's hand before he left and walked out of the courtroom.
There's nothing screwed up about that crime scene. Is it contaminated? I challenge anybody to tell me there was a crime scene that wasn't contaminated. All crime scenes are contaminated. That's how ridiculous this whole thing is. There's no question as to whose blood that was. Contaminated, sure, everything is contaminated. But to use that as a defense, it's ridiculous.
There were probably some mistakes. I don't doubt that, but nothing that changed anything. If they contaminated a piece of blood evidence, it didn't mean that he didn't do it. All the evidence still pointed to one person and one person only.
All right, Detective Philip Van Adder is still on the witness stand undergoing cross-examination by Mr. Shapiro. Good morning, Detective Van Adder.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Another prosecution witness targeted by the defense was Detective Philip Van Adder. In violation of police procedure, Van Adder had possession of O.J.'s blood during the investigation.
The defense wanted to explain why O.J.'s blood was found at the crime scene, in his driveway, in his Bronco, inside his house. And so they came up with this theory that after he willingly let his blood be drawn to be used for the investigation, that police took it and then brought it back to his home and to Bundy, sprinkled it around, all to frame him.
What'd you do after you got the blood?
I made the decision to hand carry it to the criminalist who was processing all the other evidence.
Where was the criminalist?
At Rockingham.
You didn't go to Bundy first?
No, I did not.
How many times have you taken blood out to a crime scene?
I don't know. This may have been the first time. I don't know. I can't recall right now any other times that I've done that.
I didn't believe anything Van Hatter said about anything. He just knew in his mind that Simpson was guilty, and he was prepared to do anything, say anything, to see him convicted.
Detective Van Hatter handling of the blood was weird in the fact that he went between both crime scenes, carrying the blood on this person. And also, it was out of procedure. Why would he do it that way?
A pair of socks with Nicole's blood on them was located in O.J. Simpson's bedroom. The prosecution argued the blood splashed on the socks during the murders. The defense claimed Nicole's blood was planted.
These socks were consciously, intentionally tampered with.
Circumstantial evidence very clearly showed that Van Hatter had poured some blood from test tubes onto the sock. Officer Van Hatter had taken the test tubes with the blood of the victim home with him and poured it on the sock. You have mirror images on all four sides. That couldn't happen if the sock were being worn by the killer at the time the splatter hit the sock. We looked at it, and sure enough, the blood on all four sides of the sock were mirror image, in my view, proving that the blood had been poured on the sock while it was lying flat rather than being worn by O.J. Simpson.
Dershowitz ought to be ashamed of himself. I mean, what kind of a lawyer, emeritus, or whatever the hell they call it, is this? You still want to say Van Hatter did it? All right, let's say that he did. He would have had to go to the coroner's office to get Nicole's blood. Somehow get into the office, break into their vault in their lab, find Nicole's blood, and somehow sneak it back to the socks. What did he do in the middle of the night? I mean, this is a Mission Impossible, one of those movies. Put his career on the line, go to prison. Why would he do that? This is absolute crap. And anybody with a quarter of a brain knows that. Which makes me wonder about Dershowitz sometimes.
Coming up on Trial and Error, there's drama on the Dream Team.
Johnny Cochran was amazing. He's got the eyes of the world on his every move. He's got to manage all of these egos of all of these other lawyers. Things got very testy for a time with Robert Shapiro.
Plus, I decided to set Mr. Darden up. I said, that glove won't fit O.J., and if you don't ask him to try it on, I will.
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
You analyze the DNA and you see, can I exclude the suspect? Can I rule him out? Is there anything here inconsistent with the suspect? And that's exactly what was done in this case. With every piece of evidence collected, the effort was to exclude the defendant. Over and over again, we asked ourselves, can the defendant be excluded? And over and over and over again, the answer was no.
At trial, prosecutors presented a litany of blood and DNA evidence against O.J. Simpson. Simpson's blood at the crime scene at Bundy, next to the shoe prints, and on a back gate. Simpson's blood on his Bronco and at his house. And Nicole's blood on a pair of socks in his bedroom.
The state has enormous amounts of blood evidence that they could use in this trial. But the problem is what they do is they make it so complicated that the jury can't understand it, which means you might as well not even have it if you can't use it right.
Oh my gosh, the way DNA was handled in this case was unbearable. It took about a month. You can really bring this down very simply. There was blood at the scene, there was blood at O.J. Simpson's house. How were they tested, and did they match? But that doesn't take a month. It was a history lesson. It was like going to school when you really didn't want to go to school.
DQ Alpha has 6 alleles. That is, there's 6 different forms of this DQ alpha gene.
For DQ alpha, 1.3, 4, possible 1.2, and possible trace of the 1.1 allele.
There's 2 empty squares, and then you get a notation of a 1+. That is under the column marked PGM subtype.
All the technical stuff about the alleles and everything, irrelevant. Who did the evidence belong to? Simple question. What's the likelihood that that evidence belonged to whomever? 1 in 10 billion. Yes. End of discussion. That's it. I consider myself a relatively intelligent person. The whole business about the alleles and everything was flying over my head.
I thought that the prosecution spent too much time on the DNA evidence. I thought that it became too complicated, and they would have been much better off trying to simplify it and present it in a way that was more understandable to the jury.
There were many, many long days of DNA evidence, and those were really, really hard days for the jury. The defense strategy was to also make it seem more complicated so that the jury dismissed it.
In deciding what the NRC meant about different kinds of proficiency testing, had you previously relied on the definition section in the glossary?
When you compare the way the defense team attacked the DNA evidence to the way the prosecution presented it to the jury, you could clearly see the difference in talent and experience among those lawyers. The talent on that defense team was just sensational. The prosecution was outmatched.
I think both Chris Darden and Marcia Clark are good attorneys. I really do. But I think that this case really threw them both for a loop. And I say that because they were overthinking everything. They were constantly trying to figure out what the dream team would do to counter their argument.
O.J. Simpson's defense began with just Robert Shapiro. But in the months leading up to the trial, one by one, Johnny Cochran and other high-profile attorneys would join the team, creating what became known as the Dream Team.
Being on the Dream Team was absolutely amazing. It was an amazing experience to go from being a public defender to suddenly being in the eye of a hurricane. Johnny Cochran was amazing. He's got the eyes of the world on his every move. He's got to manage all of these egos of all of these other lawyers. Things got very testy for a time with Robert Shapiro.
From the start, there were reports that the defense team could not get along, that Shapiro could not share the spotlight.
Johnny took over the case. O.J. had said right at the outset he wanted an experienced trial lawyer, and Shapiro had been fired as chief counsel, and only by begging was he allowed to stay on the team.
I remember the first time that we met at Robert Shapiro's office. He said, it's time for real trial lawyers to come in. I've done a good job at my part, but it's time for the baton to be passed to all of you. But when it came time to do it, he wasn't ready to give all of that power up. Shapiro is a huge celebrity.
Shapiro? Mr. Shapiro, can you talk to this on Shapiro? Can you just please have your autograph?
So it got weird. It got weird because he wasn't giving it up. There were all sorts of things that he was kind of doing to make it impossible, which led to everybody there at Johnny Cochran's office. There's the speakerphone in the middle, and OJ's on the line, and he tells, Shapiro, you've been a great quarterback, but this is, a running game, and you got to pass the ball to Johnny now. And we were all like, oh my God, looking down, because, it was intense.
If we're going to have to talk about a dream team, you're going to have to find it, because I never met one. You want to talk about a nightmare team? I'm an expert on that, having spent over a year in that case, a nightmare.
Was there drama with the Dream Team? Oh, yeah. Let's face it, how many egos can you get into a room that are that big and not have drama? But the thing is it's not about being in some room. It's about being in the courtroom that matters. And when they were in the courtroom, they were a well-oiled machine. And they took advantage of every possible opportunity, including the now infamous glove demonstration.
Up ahead on Trial and Error.
Your Honor, at this time, the people would ask that Mr. Simpson step forward and try on the glove recovered at Bundy as well as the glove recovered at Rockingham.
All right.
I remember the killer kind of not straightening out his hands. He wasn't really tugging on it. It was sort of like an actor's portrayal of how you put on a glove.
The whole glove demonstration, to me, was another thing that kind of turned the tide as to how I felt about guilt or innocence in the case.
This is the Court TV Podcast.
Of all the evidence in the case against O.J. Simpson, the bloody glove found outside of his home was perhaps the most significant. Part of the defense's strategy was to argue the glove was planted. But during the trial, an unexpected gamble by prosecutor Chris Darden backfired and resulted in one of the most iconic trial moments in history.
Your Honor, at this time, the people would ask that Mr. Simpson step forward and try on the glove recovered at Bundy as well as the glove recovered at Rockingham.
I was wondering, had they done any due diligence before that? And I couldn't believe that they actually went through this whole thing and they didn't know what the outcome was going to be.
I was sitting in the front row. I remember Chris being baited and taunted into that, and Chris was hot-headed. But like all of us, because we believed the glove was his, sure, try it on.
F. Lee Bailey said something to Chris Darden. He got right under his skin. Nobody anticipated Chris Darden to ask O.J. Simpson to try on the glove.
I decided to set Mr. Darden up. I wandered over to him. I said, you know, Christopher, you're okay, but you've got the cojones of a stud field mouse. Oh, my goodness. I mean, I insulted his manhood, everything else all in one phrase. I said, that glove won't fit O.J., and if you don't ask him to try it on, I will.
We'd had some really technical testimony for several days beforehand. The defense, especially F. Lee Bailey, was kind of on the side, goading Chris Darden to have O.J. try on the gloves, which was not part of the prosecution plan. Marcia Clark and the rest of the prosecutors were stunned.
Well, I was there in the courtroom, literally 2 feet away, when he tried on the glove. Darden was so inexperienced and had so little insight into trial dynamics that he fell into the trap.
All right. And I think so the jury can see, I'll ask Mr. Simpson to stand.
And I'm looking, and I look up there, and Simpson has these latex gloves on. I don't remember any latex being part of the evidence. What is he doing? They break out the gloves and, wait a minute, is he going to put the glove? Yeah, he's going to put them on.
He took the bait. So Simpson had to come forward and try and pull the glove on.
Andy, Mr. Simpson, the glove, Rockingham. Mr. Simpson seems to have a problem putting the glove on his hand.
He came over and stood in front of us. It seems like a display that went bad.
I can put a glove on and make it look really difficult. That was O.J. Simpson's best acting, by the way. O.J. Simpson has never been a good actor, but he was a great actor that day.
Is that the right-hand glove?
Yes.
All right.
I remember the killer kind of not straightening out his hands. He wasn't really tugging on it. It was sort of like an actor's portrayal of how you put on a glove.
So he does all this stuff, and the jury is eating it up. The jury is looking at each other, and they're laughing. And looking at each other, and they're going like this to each other.
Man, what a funny display to me. And first of all, I'm realizing that I guess he's putting on a show with how he's trying to put the glove on. And the fact that he also had the latex glove under it. So it looked, how do I want to say? It looked like he was performing a little bit with it and all, but the bottom line was that they weren't fitting him.
And this was counsel indicating that his fingers went all the way into the glove wrong.
You've got a glove that was soaked in blood, it was brittle, and now you're going to try to put your hand into a glove with a latex glove on. And he was holding on to the inside of the glove like this. But he never pushed his hand. He was just moving both hands. It was a setup. It was a setup. Right.
Simpson goes through his routine, you know, this and that and everything else. In front of the jury, he's acting.
We ask him to straighten his fingers and extend them into the glove if one might put a glove on him.
Yeah, I object to this statement by counsel.
All right, he appears to have pulled the gloves on, counsel.
The whole glove demonstration, to me, was another thing that kind of turned the tide as to how I felt about guilt or innocence in the case.
I was shocked at the incompetence of the prosecution in allowing him to try on the glove without making him try it on outside the presence of the jury earlier. Why do an experiment for the first time in front of a jury? It was utter incompetence, malpractice. We didn't win the O.J. Simpson case. The prosecution lost it.
The day of the glove demonstration was not supposed to be an extraordinary day. Prosecutor Bill Hodgman decided to work in a separate office that day, so he wasn't in the courtroom for it. When he came back and rejoined the team, the whole trial had changed.
I remember someone looked at me with kind of these sad eyes and said, "You don't know what happened, do you?" And that's when I found out about the glove demonstration. That certainly wasn't part of our game plan for the day. It was a mistake.
Coming up on Trial and Error.
The gloves didn't fit. The gloves didn't fit. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit, you must acquit.
The defense closing argument was really, really powerful. I remember just sitting in my seat being riveted by Johnny Cochran. I can still hear him I can just still hear him. You know, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
The Court TV podcast will return.
Prosecutors are determined to prove the murder gloves fit Simpson, despite this courtroom modeling session last week in which the gloves appear too tight.
After the glove debacle, the state had to do something because it was just hanging out there. And so they tried to come up with something because they have to. They have to work on their feet. They have to be nimble. They have to do something.
My thought was we have to do what trial lawyers have to do. We've got to go back to court the next day and keep presenting evidence. Attempt to negate the impact, kind of the punch to the gut impact that glove demonstration had.
The gloves you saw yesterday, did they appear to be in their original condition?
No, they did not.
And what was different about them?
The primary difference was the fact that due to the tremendous amount of liquid that had been on the gloves for a certain period of time, the gloves appeared to be shrunken in size from their original condition.
These gloves could have shrunk because they'd been soaked in blood.
So it was a debacle. It was just handled wrong, but believe me, the gloves fit.
Prosecutors are expected to subpoena video from NBC Sports. The prosecution believes these gloves may be the same pair Simpson wore during the murders.
12 to 15 photos, possibly more, were obtained showing Simpson wearing those very unique gloves, which were purchased by Nicole about 3.5 years prior to the murders.
Are the gloves the same style as the gloves found at Bundy and Rockingham?
Yes, they are.
Can you tell us whether or not the glove worn by the defendant is style number 70262?
Yes, it is. It is clearly his style 70263.
Were all the characteristics in the brown gloves worn by the defendant consistent with style 70263?
Yes.
Prosecution needed to do some damage control. They were convinced that that glove should have fit OJ. They thought maybe there could have been some shrinking with the glove, or maybe the problem was the latex glove he was wearing when he tried it on. So what they did was they went out and bought a brand new pair of gloves, same type, same size, and they wanted to have OJ try those on.
Turn to your right, please. Front and back. All right, thank you, sir.
Sadly for the state, too little, too late. Because you can never get that vision of OJ trying to get that glove on a hand that just won't fit. It never goes away. And nobody remembers OJ trying on a second pair of gloves.
The jury believed it didn't fit. I don't think it fit. I can tell you that afterward, there was some discussion about, why it didn't fit. Latex gloves, shrinkage, all of those things. The point is it didn't fit. And the point is that's what the jury saw. And that had a big impact on the jury.
Do the right thing, remembering that if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. The gloves didn't fit. The gloves didn't fit, it just doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Something is wrong with the prosecution's case, and your common sense is never going to let you fall for it.
The defense closing argument was really, really powerful. I remember just sitting in my seat being riveted by Johnny Cochran. I can still hear him if it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Cochran, with his blowhard, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit crap. No, you don't acquit because of this phony trying a glove on. It's a bloody glove. Anyone in this courtroom knows that when a leather glove is soaked in any liquid, it becomes brittle when it dries.
You don't need a perfect fit in order to hold a knife that I know of, or to even use it. And you have latex underneath. But for some reason to this day, they say, the gloves didn't fit. Johnny Cochran, the gloves didn't fit, you must acquit. Yeah, the gloves fit. They fit fine if you want to put them on. If you don't want to put them on and you got latex, no, they're not going to fit. Why'd you let them act in front of the jury? And to this day, Chris rues the day that he did that, and he knows it should have been done.
When Johnny Cochran said, if it didn't fit, you must acquit kind of thing, and I'm thinking, the gloves did not fit him at that point. I looked at it as, here's another moment where the prosecution has dropped the ball on this, for sure. The thing about it is that what he said actually made sense to me.
Despite the prosecution's attempt to recover, the jury and the world would never forget O.J. Simpson's courtroom glove demonstration. I'm Michael Ayala. Thanks for watching this episode of Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win?
I did not, could not, and will not have committed this crime.
I was shocked at the incompetence of the prosecution.
The defense strategy was, you can't trust the message if you can't trust the messenger.
And you want to call me a racist? I really don't care.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.